Going, hi, I'm Meta Spencer, and we're going to have some more fun today because some friends of mine have brought their toys along, or a toy, a very, very, very special toy made by MIT Sloan, which is pretty good recommendation if you want to go out and have some toys made. These folks at MIT know a thing or two about how to do simulations and models and things like that. So, what we have, we need to talk about global warming. This is not going to go away. We've got to handle this. And so, the question is, what is the best way to handle it? What can we do that is most likely to have some real payoff in terms of um, reducing global warming? Okay. So, my friends here who have their toy that they've brought along are Philip Chipman and Mark Tabbert. And these fellows are both in California. And here on the screen along with us is my assistant, Adam Wynn. Say hi, Adam.
Hello.
Adam has been helping me already this morning. We're trying to solve some technical problems. And
here it is.
Okay.
Can everybody see that?
Yeah. You don't need to run through everything that we did last time.
I cut out some of those slides. This is their contribution in a pie chart.
Mm-hmm.
And this was put out by the IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change. And it's a very good graph. So that's overall. If there's any questions about any of these, I'd be glad to try to answer. But hopefully everybody understands these. These F gases right here are a thin sliver, but they have 100 times the greenhouse warming effect. So even though they're a thin sliver, you multiply that by 100.
Okay, now that whole chart, just hold on there because this could be confusing to people. You show methane as just being 16% of the content of the greenhouse gas. However, methane is 20 times more powerful as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, which is both the red and the blue.
Yeah.
The pale blue. So this could lead people, mislead people into thinking methane is not as much of a problem as it is. In fact, I think methane is probably more immediately a lethal problem now than carbon dioxide because that we're getting it fast out of the Arctic as the permafrost melts and the clathrates in the ocean. And that is, lethal, really bad news. And it makes it much more imminent a danger.
That's a great idea. They should do a new chart that shows the overall impact versus the quantity. This is just in the quantity of gases.
Well, of course, it'd be always moving because as you get more methane emitting, it's going to be, that's the runaway effect.
Yes.
Over a period of 5 years, you can get to, blow the end of the world, because how quickly it can exacerbate its own problem,
Especially the permafrost in northern Siberia and up in Alaska and throughout the northern areas. Yes. And in the crystals underneath the ocean. I don't know if you know about that, but
that's what I was telling you beforehand about the iron salt aerosols. That's what we're going to use. But that's the secret so far. I'm not going to talk about that because I don't know.
Okay, I didn't know about that one, but I just happen to have a friend of mine that works on a grant at UCI on trying to capture the methane for the market. It's for an oil company. Trying to capture it underneath the sea. Can you believe that?
It's scattered all over the place.
It is. It is.
You need to build a great big tent all over the Arctic. Capture it that way. I don't know how you do it. Anyway,
all right. Next slide.
Distracted you from your story. Go back to your narrative.
That's okay. That's all right. This that's a good thought. I wrote it down. The next this is just gives you an idea over time that this is continuing to increase unabated. There's just no slowdown. I mean,
what are those little red dots at the top of a couple of them?
You got me.
It's just to show you where what the point is pointing to, I guess. It
That's
was
the annual
1 in
greenhouse gas
1990,
index.
and 2019 it's 1.45.
Uh-huh.
1.45 what? Degrees, what is this? 1.45.
Oh, geez.
No, I can't see what it's referring to.
Uh,
1 and 1.45 what?
well, it's a relative index. It's an index, so it's not.
Annual greenhouse gas index.
Yeah.
Over here it says it's 1. Okay, let me draw across. Okay, it's a little above 1 if you look my notions. Okay, well, let's call it 1. I see. So this 1.4 and 1.0 refer to annual greenhouse gas index, which is what? How much is being emitted per
I'm gonna
year?
have to. I'm gonna have to read up on that. I'm gonna have to plead
Let's
ignorance.
see. It's an index of radiative forcing normalized to the year 1990. If 1 was 1990, then 2019 is 1. That's okay. I see what it is. It's 1.5 that. So it's really, half again as much. When radiative forcing is greater than 0, it has a warming effect. You bet, it sure does. When it's less than 0, it has a cooling effect. Okay, good. In this indicator, radiative forcing from long-lived greenhouse gases is shown relative to the year 1750. So in 1750, it was 0.859 or something like that. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you. The sources are all in this pie chart by the IPCC. So you can see that all the types of things we do are buried under these broad titles. Some of them are easily understood. Some of them are kind of elusive. But what
Yeah,
I
and everyone could take some explanation.
everyone
I understand. I said this the other day. I understand that something like 30% of the emissions come from buildings. You got 6%, but
right.
that probably means how much is actually being exuded from the walls or something like that. Where
Yeah.
when you talk about 30%, it probably means things like how much is involved in creating the concrete that goes into the construction of the high
Yes.
rise is the whole. In other words, if you're counting everything, and if
Yes.
you're talking about business, and a lot of business goes on in buildings, etc.
Yes.
So there are different ways of interpreting these.
So it's so huge. IPCC tried to organize it and put it under title. That's why it's buried. Now I'm going to show you the next chart is from Drawdown.
Mm-hmm.
They got very specific. That's why their pie chart looks like an eye test. But if you'll look in here, the top one, one of the biggest pies is refrigeration.
Mm-hmm.
Electric cars is this little sliver.
Mm-hmm. And we
Electric
make such a
vehicles, that
big
covers
deal of
trucks too.
electric
Huh?
cars even today. You'd think it was the most important thing going on sometimes.
You'd think it was, but it is not. Wind turbine. Look at the size of these, and reduced food waste. Amazing. We throw away food because it doesn't look good, and it's a huge percentage. I think it's around 20 to 30%. Another one that the IPC doesn't get into is family planning. Look at the size of that pie. This is educating girls and women.
Mm-hmm.
It has that big an effect.
That's right.
So, what's nice about Drawdown, and Paul Hawkins realized that this was too big for any one person to go at. So, he's got all contributing sources. I mean, it must be upwards of 50 to 100
Mm-hmm.
experts that talk about every one of these areas. And so, here's the book. Here's an example page just to show you. And then this is 2017, so it's fairly new. And I say it's a shopping list by experts to arrest and reverse. So it's looking at individual things, which is needed. It's very critical because how are you going to fight it? You got to fight it the devil's in the details type thing. And here's just an example. And he rates everyone by how many gigatons of CO2 can be reduced. And this is number 59. And what's nice, what's the cost and what's the savings? And the big benefit here is that even if I don't believe in this, gosh, look at if I do this, I'm going to save money.
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
Almost
to the
everyone.
economist
Mhm.
and to the business person, this is terrific. This is what I'm going to save that much money. It's more of a strategic decision. It's not an immediate solution, savings, a lot of these, but these are long-term savings.
Yeah, but that's in fact that is the hitch in the whole thing, because there is usually some upfront money. It's a question of if you invest it, then you're going to have very good payoff.
Yes.
The payback for your money, the return on investment is going to be,
Yes.
in almost every single case is positive. You really get something out of it.
Yeah, it's a terrific book. I mean, this book is loaded. Every page is like a small little pamphlet in itself.
And Phil, they're updating it too, because if you go to their website, it's like a new edition of the book because they keep updating the numbers. And I think to keep up to date, we probably should go by the numbers. Although the book is so beautiful because of the photos, it's like a coffee table.
That's what I was going to say. It's a coffee table book.
Yeah,
and every one is a new experience because you get a new author and a new. It's like an education, a mini education,
and so well written. They're just a treat to read.
They're terrific.
Yeah, I love
there's 80 solutions in the book, and they go from refrigeration, which is number 1, to building retrofitting, which is the last one. The total cost is $27 trillion. The total savings is almost 3 times that, 74 trillion. But now I want to say this book looks at individual solutions. So it's an excellent resource for specific reduction strategies. Now this is a way to attack the problem. All right, let's go to the next look or the next question. I've got all these solutions. How do I evaluate the best, the most efficient, and the easiest way to get rid of greenhouse gases starting right now? All right, well, I'd ask myself, we need a tool that lets us implement the change, any one of these changes. And the woman that did it, really inspired it, is a Dr. Donella Meadows from MIT, who did the book, the wonderful book called...
She was the founder of the Club of Rome.
I just read that.
Yeah.
So her.
Her husband, I think Donald or something, he's been dead a number of years, but she's still in business. Yeah.
I'll be darned. That's it. And so this is the book that she wrote back in 1972. Okay, it's called Limits to Growth. I just started reading it. And
it was a very controversial one. And in fact, I think in a lot of ways I will agree with her, because it comes out that it's like predicts that we're going to use up all our natural resources by now, and we'd be in deep trouble.
It's kind of a doomsday book. There's a number of these books. It's called collapsology.
Yeah,
it can get very depressing quickly. But what I like about the book, or her look, or her attitude, is that you got to treat the world as a complex system, and there's many levers that you can push, and each lever affects the system, not just one thing. So, even if you go to bicycles, it affects many things. It has implications across a variety of things. So you push any one of these levers, and it's combinatorial. So you should look at this as a system. It's interactive with other changes. So you can do 2 changes, multiple changes. And what we want to see is the overall change to greenhouse gas emissions. So what lever or levers are most effective? I want that tool to be intuitive. I want it to be free. I want it to be on the net and easily used. And such a tool was created MIT Sloan, I think, was at the basis of it, but other companies or groups got together, Ventana and Climate Interactive.
And the tool itself is called EnROADS.
And it's called EnROADS, Energy Roads. Actually, ROA, that's an acronym also, and I forgot what it is, but I think I found this nice drawing, and they look across population, consumption, energy intensity, carbon, and it goes up to energy, CO2 emissions. Carbon dioxide, land use. They go across up to total, and then temperature, and then impacts. So the tool, the bottom line is they show the temperature. The impacts they kind of talk about. The levers that they use are policies, which is very interesting. I didn't expect that. Now, before I get into that, I want to show you a comparison of EnROADS and drawdown. These are the large areas of EnROADS. There's 6 of them. And that kind of looks like the pie chart, doesn't it? Which is nice. Drawdown has what they call sectors. And all those 80 are collected under these titles. Well, you can see somewhat of a comparison, the correlation between the two, EnROADS and drawdown, which is very, very nice. Some of them drop out. You don't see women and education in EnROADS, which is, I don't know, maybe that's under growth. I think population is in there, so it's kind of subsumed under there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if
they don't line up very well. I don't think you can really.
No, they don't line up. I started to draw lines and they started to cross over, and I just got confusing.
Doesn't work. No.
So you just got to kind of think of drawdown as kind of like looking at individual strategies, and then you look at EnROADS as a collective system. How does it affect the total system to get the temperature down collectively? Let's see, anything else I wanted to say here? No, I can't think of anything right now. So I put the effectiveness overall of every one of these areas in EnROADS. That's the decrease in temperature from the maximum that it could hit by 2100. And I'll show, that'll come up in the tool, you'll see that. But it allowed me, I ran each one separately, and it allowed me to rank them, so to speak, as to effectiveness.
Mm-hmm. That's
and
great.
In drawdown sectors, they have a table at the back of the book, and they actually rank them by sectors. And food is the most important, it has the biggest, and then energy and so forth. So down to transport, which surprised me again, only 46 gigatimes. All right. Let's go to the next, and this is the EnROADS tool. This is the tool itself. Okay, on the left, what they put up is a default screen. It says global sources of primary energy, and this is a graph of energy versus time, and it covers a 100-year span, and this is what Dr. Daniela Meadows advised. And what is the temperature going to be in 2100?
Well, wait a minute. What are those colors?
The colors are brown, coal, and here's the color definitions. Oil is red. That's how much energy it creates on top of coal. The blue, of course, is gas. Renewables, getting thicker by 2040 and 2060, is the renewables. And then we have bioenergy, from corn and biomass. And we have nuclear, which is a very, very thin line, but it's in there. And I don't know.
And this is based on the status quo. If the world goes on the way it goes on, this is what MIT thinks our energy.
Right. We have the current year 2020. If we do nothing, this will continue. All these will continue to be consumed.
And that's where we'd be. Okay.
Yes, and okay, so the gigatons of CO2, the thing we're after, is currently right now at about 60 per year. That's gigatons per year that's being produced.
But this graph is showing us what's going to happen to temperature at the status quo.
Correct, And that right here is 3.6 degrees centigrade, or they're nice to you, 6.5 degrees Fahrenheit. If we do nothing, it's going to be 2100.
3.6 degrees, is that in addition to what today we have about 1.5 degrees?
Correct.
And what's that? So in other words,
from 2000.
Okay, so they've already incorporated the 1.5 degrees increase.
Yeah.
And so
yes.
Okay. So
presumably, sorry, but presumably, if you look at the 2020 line, that's where we are now.
That's where we are now.
Okay.
But that's not, yeah, that's not showing temperature now. That's showing whatever that.
That's the gigatons. Now, if you want to show different graphs, they're full of graphs. There's population, there's CO2 emissions itself.
Okay, well, let's go, but let's not get.
All right, I could very quickly go down. Yeah. They even have sea level rise.
Look, well, they have temperature. There was a temperature.
There it is. I mean, yeah. So anyway, and you can always reset the graph, by the way, to where it was. It's very easy to use. So as a user, you can change your graph, your looks at what do you want to see, and you can constantly reset it to do comparisons, quick comparisons.
You know, that's really something that I don't think you pointed that out in the last show. That there are different there are different tables behind there that you can check not just 3.6 degrees centigrade, but even things like sea level rise. That's very, very important.
Oh yeah, or population, global population. There it is.
Oh boy, that's
quick
neat.
Look at it. And so everyone, so I'll reset again, which is very handy. It's the home. Okay. Now, do you get a fair understanding of these graphs and what you see here and the bottom line?
Yeah. Now we want to play with the other variables.
Now we're going to go down to these levers that I talked about. They're all here, and it reminds me, since I'm into music, it reminds me of a soundboard that you can adjust the volumes or you can make many adjustments to the overall production of the result. The energy. So we have these. Remember the 6 areas I told you about? There they are. There's the broad areas. And every area.
I see 10. Why do you say 6?
Energy, transport, buildings, growth, land, carbon removal. They're the headings.
But you missed. There's electrification. Technology.
Those are the sub. Those are this is the title of the group. Transport, and then under transport is energy and electrification.
Okay, so
it goes back to that previous slide. You know, drawdown has its sectors, and EnROADS has its groupings.
So you've got 5 major groups, and then underneath that you have 10 subgroups.
Correct. And the thing about these, and I'm glad you brought that out, Mark, because if you try to slide, these are highly connected in this group. So if I slide one of these, it's going to affect the others most noticeably, and which is interesting. But so.
Well, that's the whole point of the graph on the left. You'll see the change in renewables.
Yes.
If you plant trees or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
So every one of these sliders has an effect. So if I was going to say, all right, I want to plant trees, Mark, I'll take it and I'll just grab it. You notice a little hand there, and I'll pull it to the right, and I'll see, and notice what happens also to the title. If I do nothing, it says status quo under afforestation. If I go to the right a little, it says low growth. If I keep, but the temperature, watch the temperature too. If I keep increasing it, medium growth, that's nice. It's telling you. And then I've got high growth. And if I go all the way to the right on high growth, guess what happens to my overall temperature? I brought it down 0.1 C or 0.4 degrees Fahrenheit. That's nice, but it's not enough. The whole goal was to keep it at 2 or 1.5, or originally.
And it's interesting, Phil, to notice that as you move the trees, I didn't see any change on the graph to the left. In other words, it was indiscernible.
That's a good point. I didn't either.
There's no discernible. I'm sure there was some, but
it has no effect on our usage of oil, of fossil fuels, which is very interesting. All it does is sequester carbon better.
Okay.
That's very interesting. And so, go ahead.
Do another one. Do buildings and industry.
So I'll reset this. Boom. Oh, before I do that, let's go a little into every one of these titles. You can pop on a title and you can get details about it. What does afforestation mean? Plant new forest, restore old forest, and then a little description, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Draw carbon out, reduces the concentration of carbon dioxide. However, without care, it can compromise biodiversity and historical land rights. So there's a little caution in there. You can adjust, instead of the big slider valve for this area, this, you can go down here and individually adjust the percent. There's another slider valve, and you can fine tune it. Okay? And you can have the afforestation.
Here, you just bothered me a whole bunch.
Oh, what?
As if your assumption is, when you did this afforestation, it's going to break the heart of all these foresters, and me too, because I've believed in forestry as a major thing. But that is based on the assumption that you don't have any available land for use for afforestation. That's not true.
Meta, why do you say that?
Look over here. Look on the thing that you clicked on it and then looked at some of the things behind there, the assumptions behind it, and it said there was no available land for afforestation. No wonder you're not getting anything, because you don't have any room to afforest anything. So now move it up all the way. Move it up all the way. There you go. Now go back to your previous chart and look at forestry now and see whether the afforestation does more for you. Okay, move that guy up there. And it doesn't do any different.
Well, you get the point.
That's reflecting the same thing, Meta. That's just a different way to move how many trees they're planting. And they built assumptions in of how many we could do. They have to have some kind of a knowledgeable person studying forestry. We can't plant Detroit with trees, or so. I'm sure they've got that's part of the metric.
I can tell you for sure, there's a lot of work been done in Zurich on this very thing. So this chart does not include any up-to-date information about afforestation. Not only that, but you don't even have a category for land use for agriculture, where it's probably maybe the best thing that you could be doing to sequester carbon probably is just change your system of agriculture. There's nothing even there showing agriculture.
Meta, I think what's happening now is that you're making the assumption that forests are more important than MIT said, and you're assuming.
I'm saying I don't think they're up to date.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of what we're looking at here. This tool is based on the latest information that MIT has available. So, and this is going to happen. This is what happens with audiences when we do presentations, and they think cars are the most important thing. Let's stop talking forests for a minute. Let's go to cars, Phil.
All right,
but explain to me why there's not a thing in there about agriculture.
Listen, I'm sure we could if we get into it right now. But now, since we're showing this to the public, let's take another example. This Phil's example, because like he said in the beginning of the show, he thought if we drove electric cars, that was going to solve climate change. Right, Phil?
Yeah.
So let's look at your deal.
And I wish I could answer your question because I don't know the underlying algorithms behind afforestation. The only detail I got was this. And when I moved the slider all the way to the right, I didn't finish right see, you start years 2021, time to secure the land, 10 years, and planning time is 30 years. That's where so when you move that slider all the way to the right, that's what you get. And you can change those if you want. So I don't know the details underneath. I just picked it as an example. And in this tool, it had very little effect on the overall temperature. But let's go to electrification. I think that's cars. Decrease the use of electricity. Oh, that might be in transport too. That's buildings, transport. Here we go. So I'll click on that. There we are, electric cars. And there's the details underneath. What I'll do is I'll slip it to the right. It's currently incentivized. It's not highly incentivized. And it brought it down 0.1 degrees. Not very much. That's that little sliver. That's drawdown says the same thing. It just doesn't have that much of an impact. All right, so population didn't do much. If you look right here, what we did, if we leave it the same, it's going to be 10.9 billion people in 2100. They say the lowest growth is 9.1 billion by 2100.
We're already 8.6, I heard.
Oh.
Ready today. I just heard that last week.
Oh, boy. Okay. Now we're going to go. Can we go to the energy supply?
No, I want to do cars. You never finished cars.
That was transport electrification.
Oh, that was only 1/10 of a degree.
That was only 1/10 of a degree.
Adam, you can play with this too. Suggest something. What do you want to know about?
Nuclear has a pretty slim line at present. Yeah. And we know some countries are pushing for more nuclear power plants, like China, and other countries are straying away from them. So what would happen if we adjust with the nuclear related settings?
Okay. So status quo currently, subsidized, which I think it is currently anyway, highly subsidized. And it brought it down 0.2. So it's more effective than population. It's more effective than afforestation, which I didn't know. It's interesting. But the problem with nuclear is all the waste.
How about technology?
Technology. I'll reset it because we're looking at individual. This is carbon. This is direct air capture, carbon sequestration. This is new methods to be invented too. So this one is pretty effective.
Also, nice. Unfortunately, all the people I talked to have discouraged me about that. I used to pin a lot of hope on that, but they say it's economically, it's just not going to be feasible.
Is that why? Is it too much investment for not much return?
Right, because for one thing, I won't go into the whole story, but basically, I don't know many people who say that it's really going to take off.
Interesting.
It's not economically feasible.
Okay.
But that's and we'll get into that more, Meta, because being not economically feasible assumes that fossil fuel prices remain the same. So maybe it's time, Phil, to talk about it.
The methane is a very effective one by itself, by the way. I think it's on this one is the most effective besides the one we're going to show you. So that was actually 0.5 degrees. That's not bad. And it's, notice they show a cow there. So it's mostly from cows and agriculture. And then it does have natural gas drilling and waste.
And I question
and the F gases are in here.
See, you say they're up to date. They absolutely are not up to date because they're not talking a thing about permafrost or clathrate. And cows are, in fact, if you grow your cows the right way, they're actually a beneficial thing instead of a detrimental thing, because you can offset their emissions by both ends of the cow by the things that they do to protect the soil. So,
and that's in Drawdown, by the way. I read that in Drawdown. Yes.
But there's a lot more very, very recent research on the rapidity of the melting of the permafrost and the clathrate, which means it is really the most alarming thing that I've read in the last 2 years. It's very, very ominous, and it's not even mentioned in as a source of methane. The only thing they're talking about is animals, and that's just,
Well, I don't think that. I'm not sure that's true. We'd have to look at one of the largest sources of greenhouse gases is flare gas. Soviet Union is the #1 flare gas source in the world. I think we're number 4. Nigeria is number 2 or 3.
Now, hold on. What are they doing? A flare is something where you burn the gas.
Yeah, they have to burn it off
to keep it from escaping the atmosphere.
And that's creating CO2. That's warming the planet. And that's one of the largest untalked, and it's illegal in the United States to flare gas. Of course, they're not.
But it does is by creating heat, or what? Because if you burn gas, what do you have left? I don't know, chemically, what?
CO2. You have CO2. You're turning methane into CO2.
I see.
And they're done at all these refineries and industrial plants.
So where does it show up here on this chart as a variable?
No, but it's part of methane. I'm sure it's in their figures.
Yeah, it is. Methane released at sources like cows, natural gas, and waste.
I'm the guy that's here trying to defend these charts and these assumptions.
Yeah.
Because I've met with and talked with the people at MIT. They've worked on this thing, I think, since 1972, according to Phil's reading.
Yeah.
The people that did the woman that did the
Meadows.
Yeah, Meadows. I can't think of what's it called. What's her book called, or what's that?
Limits.
Yeah. Well, look at that list. I mean, they're including a lot of things that are themselves questionable or more complicated than it suggests. Like, for example, one of the main sources of methane is rice paddies. So in Asia, that's the main thing they eat. And you have to have this wet land, and the wetness makes methane emission. That's a major thing. They don't now, but the thing is, they don't mention permafrost. They don't mention the melting clathrates in the ocean.
No.
They don't mention any of those. And those are the scary part.
They're the scary ones. Yes, I know.
Well, I made a note to check that. I know the IPCC doesn't figure methane or permafrost. The IPCC doesn't really consider the loss of ice the way scientists really think it's going to happen, which is could be a big effect as Greenland melts.
Huge.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Now, you watch my show on February the 12th, because I'm just setting it up, and this guy, Peter Wadhams, is the biggest authority on the East Siberian Ocean, and that's where there are plumes of methane coming up. And it's not just from the ocean, it's also the permafrost, which is melting. And the Siberia is the worst place in the world for permafrost. It's just mountains of permafrost and carbon sequestered there, which is melting. And once that stuff happens, then all of the, the frozen grass and dead animals and things from 30,000 years ago, that starts producing methane and gets into the atmosphere and becomes a runaway situation.
Yeah.
So all of that.
I'd like to make another comment to defend what MIT and these other two groups have done. Yeah. When the Senate, 30 members of the Senate have watched this presentation, not by us, but by other people at MIT. And it was seen as one of the most hands-on explanations of what's happening in the world and of the importance, which we haven't got to. So we really should go there pretty quickly. And the other thing is, when I show this kind of thing to city council people, they're not burdened, Meta, with as much knowledge as you have about all these different things. But I have a feeling all these different things are in the MIT program. I can't imagine MIT forgot all this stuff. So I'm going to work with Phil, and we're going to try to come back and defend that better to you on a personal basis sometime and talk about it.
Because let me tell you that the methane, the alarm about the methane has only become extreme in the last year and a half. And the most recent report I've seen is only like a month or two old. So every day you watch the news and you find a worse reason to be terrified.
Well, but see, I disagree. When I learned about climate change from Bill McKibben by reading his book, Earth, that was not what I really learned at the beginning, but that's when I really became convinced that the things like methane and loss of the Arctic ice, where you have a blue ocean instead of a white ocean, instead of a white, those are the big, big problems. And I knew that from reading his book that was published in 2008. So methane is getting more news play today in the media, but I think we've understood the nature of methane for a long time.
No, you haven't. The difference is that people have said, yeah, it's bad. There's a lot of it. And once it gets loose, we're in big trouble. But it's going to take about 100 years for it to get loose. It's frozen and it takes a long time to thaw. And it's only very, very recently that they're finding out, no. It is going gangbusters thawing. It's going very fast. And therefore, and it has something to do also with the depth of the ocean. If you're talking about deep water, by the time the methane gets from the bottom of the ocean all the way to the top, it's been absorbed in some other way. And therefore they say, don't worry about it. We have plenty of time about that. It's not true. If you're in the shallow ocean, like the East Siberian Shelf of Russia, then you have it doesn't take very much for it to get to the top. So it's coming off in huge plumes. That's where it is, and there's a tremendous amount of it there. Mm-hmm. So all of that information has been coming out in the last 6 months or a year, and the most recent is only maybe 2 months old, if that. I've been reading it recently. So all of this is very, very fast information changing.
Right. Well, listen, we haven't really got to the climax of our story. Okay. We haven't got to the good news. So Phil, take it on, Phil.
All right. So going through this whole thing, is there one thing that does it? Okay. I'm going to go down to the bottom line. You see this carbon price. It's the one thing, it's kind of unique. It's the one thing through here that is foisted across the board on fossil fuel, extracting fossil fuel and that out of the earth. It's the one thing that goes across the board. It affects all industries that use it. And that's carbon price. And you notice I just moved it hardly at all, and it went down 0.1. So you can see the rate of change is hard to believe. And I keep moving. Now I'm at a high carbon price. Now what's high mean? That's $99 per ton of CO2. That's a lot of CO2. But $99, and it starts in the year 2021.
What do you mean it's a lot of CO2?
It's a metric ton of CO2. It's a lot of CO2.
But that's dollars. I thought that's 99 is dollars.
Yeah, per ton of CO2.
Right.
And they know each fuel, how much CO2 is produced by each fuel. Oil and coal, they all have their concentrations. So it's easily, there's a price easily placed upon every fuel. So now if I keep going to the right, we're down below 3 degrees. There's no other slider that is as effective as this tool. And this is not, or this lever, this is not a regulation placed upon it. It is a price. In other words, it's going to get spread across the economy, but it's going to be right at the source. So it's even Steven across all products. I mean, there's no favorites.
When you get all the way to the highest, what price are you with all the way to the highest?
Not high enough, by the way. It's $250. I've seen $500 a ton, twice that price.
Okay, but now let's stick on the graph.
All
so
right.
They're saying at $250 a ton, it gets down to 2.7, right?
Yes.
So let's go back to the chart, Phil. We'll talk more, but let's see. We want to be at 2 degrees.
Let's take a look what happened up here. You see this graph up here?
Mm-hmm.
I'll back it down. Look at how much coal. It's pretty even across coal, oil, gas, renewables, and bioenergy. Look what happens to coal and oil, and look what happens to renewables as the price goes up. It's the most effective means of increasing renewables. Coal goes down to almost very thin, very thin. Oil is still there.
In the United States, under a carbon price regulation in the United States, coal would be gone in the United States 100%, according to studies. And that wouldn't be true
because of the cost of energy. The cost of energy. I've got another graph. I have another chart, but this cost is like 15 cents a kilowatt hour. Renewables is like a nickel per kilowatt hour, if you can believe that. So if you're going to make a choice in how you heat your building or drive your trucks, you're going to pick the one that has the cheapest cost of energy. That's it. The economy is going to drive this. Everyday people are going to say, I can't afford coal or oil because the renewables are so darn cheap. That's what's driving this whole thing. That's what gets me excited.
Yep.
Now, 2.7 is not enough. So now we can go after these other entities and look at that. All I did is increase the energy efficiency. What was that? Oh, that's just shipping, air travel, transportation, energy efficient vehicles, hybrid vehicles. That's what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a bit. Electric trucks and everything. Energy efficiency, look at that. Okay. Got down another 0.1. The one we know that's already, methane is probably the second most effective. Let's go move that. Well, let's reset. That's what I like about this whole thing. Move carbon price all the way over, and let's try methane. 2.6, 2.5, 2.4. Oh my gosh. Just methane alone, we drag it all the way, get out down to 2.2,
Mm-hmm.
which is amazing. And then if we just do a little bit of growing trees, oh, I like that. 2.1. Let's just stick there at 2.1. If we have just a bit of, I want to try population, didn't do anything. Which is fun. That's the fun of this whole thing. You think population's going to help. You think economic growth is going to help. It did. Extremely low growth. What does that mean? Well, I only got 0.5% GDP per year. I don't know. I think it's 1 to 3 right now, which people like. All right. So now we're down to 2. If you're not happy with that, we can go after. There's plenty of other opportunities. Electrification. Now we're below 2. A little bit of electrification. Nothing. I didn't realize that. Every time I do this, I do it differently. Energy efficiency. Didn't do anything.
Because you're already doing it by your carbon price.
I think you're right.
That's probably true.
You're right. I didn't think of that, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Technological, I didn't touch that at all. That does have some effect. Sequestration. So 1.7. How about a little? Oh, go ahead, Mark.
So I want to try to point out at this point, we've talked a lot of things about a lot of things today, but the truth is, the carbon price at $100 a year, according to legislation that's already in Congress, or was the last Congress and will be in the new Congress, $100 a ton for carbon pollution is only a 6-year window. It only takes 6 years to get there under legislation that's already been suggested.
Okay.
And then to get to 250, which was a high carbon price, that's 16 years. And every time somebody figures carbon pricing, they don't really take into account everything that happens that's not in these charts. Mm-hmm. Mainly conservation. In Australia, they had a carbon price a long time ago. It was introduced, and in 3 months, and I forget the number now that I'm using it, in 3 months, emissions dropped substantially in 3 months with nothing else done except they announced a drop in a carbon tax. So at that point, people don't want to pay a tax in Australia, and they turned out the lights and the kids drove less and everybody did things a little bit differently. And that's not in these kind of charts because we don't really understand. And the other thing is, there were scientists back, 15 years ago at Stanford and UC Davis, Mark DeLucci and Mark, I forget the other guy's name, they were both Mark. They said we could be off fossil fuels in 20 years in the United States with an effective carbon price.
Jacobson.
Right, Jacobson. Now, a lot of people criticize Jacobson and DeLucci, but the truth is, if they were wrong by 5 years, okay. The point is, and they thought technology would come along not to sequester carbon. That's not how they were thinking. They were thinking we were going to become more innovative. We were going to figure out things we hadn't figured out yet, just like we are right now, where the market favors fossil fuels. Imagine if every entrepreneur, every innovator, every business person was faced with higher energy prices every year unless they do something. Things are going to happen that we can't put in these charts, is my total belief. And the other important thing that we haven't made mention of that you got to mention, we always think of our carbon footprint as our own carbon footprint, what we do personally. But our carbon footprint account in the United States, I'm going to use us, our carbon footprint that's personal, including your gasoline, your heating and cooling, and your electricity, is about 1/3 of America's carbon footprint. The other 2/3 is the stuff we buy. So it's the factory, it's the farm, it's everybody else that's living their lives that's creating emissions. And we can't affect it personally, unless we, change and don't eat meat, right? We would help. But the thing is, carbon pricing is going to help everything become more, it's going to be, your meat's going to become more expensive. If you put a carbon price on, and you want to ship that cow meat from the Amazon, you're going to have to pay a lot more freight. Your meat's going to get expensive because that corn, to raise corn, which we currently subsidize, by the way, we should never subsidize animal feed. If we didn't subsidize animal feed, the price of meat would skyrocket. And if you tax meat, which I think we should because it's a real killer of people. But anyway, I'm getting off the subject. The point is, the Biden administration, John Kerry, Janet Yellen, Gina McCarthy have all stated support for carbon pricing. But I just heard that Meta sent me something from John Kerry talking on CNN, I think. Meta, you sent me that link?
Right.
And it's so sad that John Kerry says in this interview, and he's specifically asked by the CNN interviewer,
Tapper,
specifically asked, isn't carbon tax really the way to go? Isn't that the most effective, fast thing? And John Kerry says yes. And then he says, but you got to look at what's already happening right now. In other words, he's going to ignore the carbon tax statements he just made. And he talks about GM changing the cars to being all electric by 2035.
Yeah.
Well, and then he goes on and describes that as making new jobs. Everything he describes about the GM move should really be put over on the carbon tax move, because the carbon tax happens today, and all those job creation things, all that technology, all those entrepreneurs, everybody goes to work to do that.
Well, if you listen to the language he used, I think it was a Courier or somebody said, would it work? And he says, well, it would. That's the word would. It would work. And what he means is we can't pass it through Congress because there's too much opposition. You really have a hell of a time convincing people that carbon tax, that any increase in tax is good. Even if you say, well, we're even going to give it back to you. You know, the next day you're going to get a check for the same amount or for your share of it. Then, but nevertheless, it's really politically hard to get a carbon tax passed. But you're right. If we passed it, we'd be home free practically.
Speaking as someone who started working on a carbon tax in 2012 and has gone to Washington 2 times a year at least since then. When I first went in 2012 and they told me, what in the hell is a carbon tax? Nobody knew. They knew what cap and trade was, but they didn't understand a simple carbon tax.
Yeah. Especially
one that's revenue neutral, where the money goes into the government's hands and is turned right around and given to people. But today, and my congressman, Dana Rohrabacher, the Republicans' favorite congressman, if anybody knows that name, in Orange County, California, he said to me, Mark, if your bill gets to the floor, I'll probably vote for it. Not because I ever will believe in climate change, but I know how polluting and how many people die and get sick because of pollution. He was a Californian, raised in Southern California, where the air here was so filthy, you couldn't see the mountains at the end of the street 2 miles away because the air was so bad. So Meta, if you tell me, and I know right now from personal connections in Washington, there are at least a dozen Republicans that would support carbon pricing today if they get the balls, or excuse me, if they get the courage to step out as a group and do it. And I think there's a chance, and I'll say this, if there were fair, all we have to have is fair hearings in Congress. If we have fair hearings in Congress to examine solutions like we have today with EnROADS, the truth of the matter is it's so obvious. We already have Kevin McCarthy. We already have, who's in the Senate? What's his name? We already have those guys saying we need a carbon price, we need a solution, or we need a climate plan in the Republican Party. And that's based on our personal visits to Congress. Citizens Climate Lobby is a place you need to go to, in my opinion, if you want to get really the latest information. And carbon tax costs no money.
I'm on your team, believe me. I've been on your team for 15 years at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we met Meta for the first time about a month ago, I was dumbfounded that our Canadian volunteers for Citizens Climate Lobby didn't know Meta, because Meta did a presentation on carbon pricing in 2008, and she was 100% right in her explanation. Everything. Michael Bloomberg supported a carbon tax in 2005.
I love fighting with you guys. So let's do another fight one of these times. So we'll say goodbye now. Take care. Thanks. Bye-bye.